It's a fairly straightforward one-man program. At the end of whatever Arnold is presenting,
Oh my gosh.
at the end of that, I'm going to get Brother Adams to give us a closing prayer, and at the same time, bless any of the refreshments. It's all yours, Arnold.
I don't know how the sound is. Am I sound enough for everybody on the back row?
Yep.
All right. Now, if I get too loud, you hush me, and if I don't, I get where I'm not loud enough, you crank me up. Well, this sort of has been planned a long time ago. Ed Holmes wanted to do this several times, and we'd start and something would always happen. Well, he's already graduated on the other side, so maybe he's looking in. And we've got some folks here that had a hand in especially the building of this building and the purchase of this property and so forth. And that's what I'm going to spend most of my time on today. I want you to know there's a lot of history. So if you want about a month's supply, we're going to bring these journals. These are journals that we helped to find when we started searching the history of this area. And some of them are the missionary journals. We're going to leave these with the library president. Where's President Stern? Who's your librarian? Now, these copies are for the library, but there's one that's not here that we're going to make more copies of. We just have one, and it strictly has to do with Josie. Some of these have to do with Madison County. Some of them covered a big area, all South Texas and that. Now you realize that today, we got in this building the first Sunday of June in '83, and that's 46 years ago, sliding a month. But there was a lot happened before then. There's about 4 or 5 different groups that the church is here. First, we have records that started about 1843. They sent missionaries down here, two of them being Tisdale and Preston Thomas. And if you want to read about Preston Thomas, those journals are over in the Institute Library at A&M. He served at 5 missions in here. And the first mission, he left when the saints were being run out of Nauvoo. He got called on a mission, he and Elder Tisdale, to come down to Texas. He had a brother that lived down here out west of us, but I never joined the church as far as we know. But he served that many missions, and he was always so optimistic about his work and how many people he was baptizing. And they'd get a group together, and then they'd make a little train, and they'd head west. And the early trains, they were about 2,000 miles. They had 2 routes. They talk about the Arkansas route and the northern route. And they would take them probably about 5 months to make the trip, because they might make 5 miles a day. Think you got all those oxen and all those cows they're driving, milk cows, and they stop once in a while and kill a buffalo or an antelope, or get some fish. Or the Indians, they'd have to barter with the Indians. A lot of times they started out with a lot of cows, but by the time they got there, they didn't have near as many cattle, because you had to give the Indians some to come across their territory. That was Indian territory. So a lot different than today. Now, a little later, some of them went up through St. Louis and across. So there's a whole amount of history we could talk about just for those people. But Preston Thomas say, I know he served 5 missions, and he wrote a letter to one of the members of the president of the Quorum of the 12, and he said he hoped, as far as he knew, he was the only missionary in Texas. He said, we need 10 more. He said, I was hoping to get to go home this winter and be with my family. He says, ever since I've been in the church, I've been on missions, and a lot of the people that we were taught the gospel have good homes out west, and he said, my family is still living in tents out west. So you got to, you just kind of keep, I call it the Preston Thomas era. All right? Civil War came along. So in about 61, they sent Erastus Snow down here. He was one of the members of the Quorum of the 12, and if you read about Erastus Snow, he went everywhere. He went down to South America, to Chile, and went to where Nana was raised. That Snowflake, part of that name came from his name, Erastus Snow. So he told them, come down here, that President Young, all these little colonies that were few around, that he wanted them to come out west. So they have that group. Then we don't have much record, and during this period of time, there was a family that got a land grant out around where the Deans live, out around Elwood, and their name was Alphen. And then when he came down here, he left a 17-year-old son called Israel Dodge to take care of the property in Illinois. They came here from Illinois and got a big land grant. Well, he married pretty soon. His bride was 12 years of age. And so they took care of the farm. Decided one day he's out plowing in the field, and here came 2 people walking down the road and asked if he'd give them a drink of water. And he did. It so happened that one of those people was Joseph Smith, and they invited him up to Nauvoo. And we know he went because his name's on the roster at the Nauvoo house. Now his family always said, we have no record that we can prove, but his family always said, ancestors, which a bunch of them still live around that Elwood and this area, that Joseph Smith baptized him in the Mississippi River up there at Nauvoo. Well, they moved down here, had two children when they moved here, and hopefully he came to share the gospel with his family, but we never find that they did. Well, they were part of this group. The reason I'm putting them in there, they were part of this group that went out with the Civil War. But they went through St. Louis, and they really got in trouble. They got cholera. One man got bit by probably a cottonmouth as he going across the river. He died. So they asked often that if he would marry his wife and take care of that family. They went to St. George, Utah area. All right, jump a few years. When Israel Dodge was about in his 70s, in the 70s, he got called back to a mission in the Southern States Mission and got assigned here to Madison County for a while. He still had, his mother was living here. He had 2 sisters that lived here. He had a brother that lived here, and he had a son that lived here. As far as we know, they said the missionary journals always said they believe like we do, or they got treated real kindly by them. But as far as we know, none of them ever went west or anything of that sort. So they was called the Indian Territory, then the Southwestern States Mission, then the Southern States Mission, and then about 1960 '86 or somewhere in there, they changed to the Central States Mission. That means they took from the Canadian border and just took a strip all the way to the Gulf. So that's, and then when they had, today we talk about districts and zones, then they talk about conferences. They'd have a West Texas conference, an East Texas conference, a South Texas conference, and that was what we know today as a zone or something of that nature, the missionary days. So then the next time was when they started getting more to our group. We call this the Josie area, or the Shannon area, or the Little Utah area, because it's all the same place. The missionaries came into this country. They were well received in the Midway area and around that area of Center. There was no Josie then. And there was a school that's on, if you turn there, that road at the cemeteries, you know where the Josie Cemetery is, and you go east, about a mile and a half down there, there was a big school, Center Community. And that was the headquarters of all the deal. Had a railroad track they went through, but they didn't have a post office or a train stop there. So when the missionaries came, they'd have to come to Madisonville on the Boll Weevil. That's what they call the train. It was a spur out of Navasota. And you ought to read the Missionary Journal, how some of them spelled boll weevil. They had no idea what a boll weevil was. If you don't know, that's a little insect that gave the cotton farmers a heck. So they kind of finally came up with something in my lifetime that they can control him with. So they bring the boll weevil, ride the boll weevil, and then they'd walk back the 4 miles to Center. Unless it happens, somebody'd be in there with a buggy or a wagon. But most of it was walking, carrying those grips that's been around. 17 pounds, they said it weighed. They had their change of clothes, their literature, and all that in there. That little journal. They had little books about that wide, about that high. That's what they kept the journal in, and they kept it faithfully. And several of them, you'll have the 6th or the 7th book on their mission. So now that starts that period of time. And so the first baptism was in 1907 at Lenora Wells. 76-year-old woman, and Elder Terry said that they was the second missionary. He and Elder Thomas Perry and Elder Standage were the first two that came in this country in that Center Josie time. They came together. Elder Terry, he was 40, in his early 40s, had a family. Standage, he was just a young squirt. He was from Mesa, Arizona, and of course Terry, he was from St. George, Utah. So does that connect in? Where did the orphans go? St. George, Utah. So, and it so happens that some of these Terry's, the way we finally got this journal, we could have had all kind of trouble getting it until we finally, one of our daughter-in-laws said the right word and found out that they are kin to the Terrys. Then we didn't have any trouble. So that's where that started. The real baptism started happening in 08. 08, 09. They built a man by the name of Joe Shannon, gave it 3.5 acres of land out there to the church. All they're having now is just meetings in people's houses, Sunday school, firesides, things of that nature. And he gave them this property. And most of it's been taken now by the new highway when you drive by the cemetery. So you just got about an acre and a half of the old property there, where the cemetery is. So, by 1909, they built a church, got it finished in September. In November or December, it was burned down. They said some of the members wrote to the mission headquarters. It was in Kansas City, Missouri then. Eventually it became Independence after the church bought 25 acres there. But they wrote, said they can burn our buildings, but they can't burn our testimony. So they started building again in January, and in February they had the church already built again. So you can tell what a big church it was. I think it said it was about a 32 by 20 by 12. One room, pot-belly stove, had a curtain in the middle you drew. I always said when I was a kid it was fun. You sat in either side of the curtain, you could hear every class that was going on. You could hear the primary, you know, the young and this, so you tuned in where you wanted to and what the subject you liked the best. So that was that. That lasted, in fact, they had over 100 members by 11, and that's the year that our family, my grandparents moved in. And that same year, I was telling Reynolds here that he had a brother that lived over in Comanche County with them. They moved to Gilmer, Kelsey area and settled. And so I asked one of my uncles one time, I said, why didn't you go to the same place? He didn't know. But he said the women couldn't get along together. The wives, he didn't know. So that lasted. A lot of apostles came there. A lot of conferences. The first big conference they had to show you how receptive the community was, they had 18 elders, the mission president, as Brother Benyon, President Benyon, and then they had a couple of families that came up from where Stoneham is. You know where that is? Dyer's Mill. Down here today, it's known where the Renaissance Festival is held every year. And the Dyer's Mill, probably where all this lumber came from when they built. And the Coods and the Dyers run the big sawmill down there. And so they came up just to show you how receptive that community was. Had 18 elders, had the Coods, the Dyers, President Benyon. They put them up in the community. And when you see some of these little clapboard houses, I know where all the kids slept, because you know what they gave the missionaries and those other families that were there. Lasted real strong until about 1917, and then there was a bad drought. It droughed out most of them, and they went, a lot of them to Arizona, out west. So, and then so the Josie area ended about mid-50s. Then we got to get Huntsville in there. Huntsville was organized in the early 50s. And a few active families that are over here went over to Huntsville for 20 years. So, see, it's interesting, isn't it? When the Lord, you know, there's a scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants I've always liked. It says if you want to try to stop the work of the Lord, it said it's just like putting your puny arm out there and trying to stop the waters of the Missouri River. And if you've ever seen the Missouri River, it's be pretty hard to stop. They're having a lot of trouble right now stopping it, having floods and everything up there. So now let's go bring us into this time, and that's what I say. I've just wore you out 15 minutes. Now we're going to talk about this. And a lot of you here that had a whole lot to do with it. And I'm glad that we finally had this, because there's not going to be many of us left much longer. So the Lord decided He wanted something to happen in Madisonville. Now we've gone 20 years and got about 2 families, maybe 3 once in a while, that's going back and forth to Huntsville. They had their Relief Society during the week, so that's another trip over. Then the sisters went faithfully. When we had the week, when what we call the young men, young women now, we had it on, I think, a Thursday night. I'm not for sure, but everybody came. It wasn't just young men, young women. It was everybody in the brain. Sister Gross, I don't think any of you remember her. She's a Tools matriarch. Baptized in about 1899 down in the Trinity Bottom. Every time I see the Tools, I kid them. Missionaries say in their journal, didn't sleep a wink. Fleas ate us up last night. Missionaries had a lot of things they contended with. Elder Terry said one thing, he didn't want to come speaking like they spoke down here. I didn't thought we spoke too bad, but he decided that. But he talks about his mission, said if there's any part of his body that hadn't been bitten or stung or anything, he wanted to know what it was. There were red bugs, there was chiggers, there's the same thing. There was a bed bug, there was mosquitoes, there was itch and fleas. So they were always fighting something. Talk about taking that sulfur and lard and smear over them for the itch. Said you couldn't hardly stand it. So just think of what they went through now. They walking 25 miles a day, 15 miles a day, taking that 17 grip, come to the creek or how they gonna get across? If it's not a low crossing or a bridge, a lot of times they just took their clothes off and waded in and dressed on the other side. Mud, anything. Go down, they'd sometimes find an old tree and get across to go across. Well, so missionaries, you don't have anything to contend with. And a lot of it's interesting in their journals, they all had something they did every day. A lot of them would tell how the weather was. Many of them said how many miles they walked every day. And a lot of them would say how their meal was. Some of them were pretty good, some of them was. One of my favorites was Elder Terry. When you read it, they went to a house one day and was sitting at lunch and said all at once an old hen jumped up on the table and walked across the table. He said, I turned my plate over. And he said, my companion didn't bother him a bit. They had their trials, but they were faithful. That's the thing about it. And they'd say, and when they wanted, they talk about a meal or a place to stay, the term they used was, we asked for entertainment. And sometimes they may get it the first house, and sometimes it may be the 6th or 7th or 8th house. Sometimes they didn't get it at all. They'd have to sleep out on the ground or find an old barn or shed or something. So I always said they had to have a lot more faith than we had. It's a different kind of faith, though. We got our challenges too. All right, now let's come up to this time when the Lord decided that He's going to have something back here in this area after all these years. All at once, He moved on some families to start moving back in. One of the first were the Deans in the 70s, about the mid-70s or so. Somehow they had decided there must be something better, and you can tell by the name that Andre's father was what denomination they belonged to. His name was John Wesley.
Ah, Presbyterian.
And And you'd think the family helped organize the church. And so, but they joined the church. They had a chance to buy the old schoolhouse out at Elwood. So they bought it, tore it down over a few years, and then they moved down here. Well, when they got here, there's some more families were moving in. You got the newspaper editor, Stiffemeyer came in. We got some people named the Killingworth. You got some people named the Pointer. That all at once they just kind of showed up here and there and other. Not many in Madisonville. Most of them's over here to Beat Eyes and up north, above Hilltop Lakes. And even when we had the branch was organized, we had Grapeland and Crockett in our branch. And some of the families were in there. So see, the Lord starts putting this in there. Well, when they got the deans in here, Brother John, he wanted to share the gospel. So he started, their family started having little firesides and meetings in people's houses. I heard Ed Hone say his wife and son was baptized and Ed wasn't baptized. They were running some kind of little motorcycle business in Huntsville, and they moved out there to Beat Eyes. And he said that they was at the Bird's house and they had what they call a fireside, and he thought they was, he said it took him several years to realize that they were having that fireside for him. But it took. That's the thing about it, it took. And then we decided all at once that we had an opportunity to move back, change our profession completely. So we decided we'd come back. And just a little bit, I haven't got all the families. You'll read these journals and find out a little for yourself. So they decided that we'd have a branch here. And that we first, Andre can tell you something about it. He was just a teenage boy. Some of them were smaller, like Lanita and Preston. And we'd have these little get-togethers and things of nature and over here. And all at once we had a place, we got a permission now to have a branch, but we don't have any place to have it. Asked a lot of churches around. Brother Dean did, but didn't have much success. But finally, one of his cousins let us have a little place out off of the square on 21, just as you come up to the light. You know, right there, the other side of Stanley's, but it's on the other side of the road. And it was you had to go upstairs, and it was 2 rooms. And if you had the second room, you just had to look through the door. And if you didn't get in that hole, you couldn't see who was speaker, who was up front. Had flashes on the stairs, out in the parking lot, all over. The kids, they like to hear the trucks stop at that light and goose up when they come, you know. So sometimes we have a little problem with reverence, but not too bad. And then, but it moved pretty fast. Hal, too, was involved. He was on the High Council. And you people in Huntsville, there's not many people in the Huntsville beginning left. If you want to have one, there's not many of us left. That when Huntsville started in the early 50s. And so he was on the High Council. Burr said, we need a place to have it. They had a little lot up there beside them. They said, well, you can use that lot. The church can use that lot. Well, then Hal, too, had a big hand in helping us get a double-walled trailer made specifically for a church house with a little outbuilding for the office and all. So we had some wonderful times there. one of the big ones was a New Year's Eve party and dance. That's when most of the women were still young enough to dance, and the kids that wasn't old enough to dance, they could dance that night. And brag about they'd go and have the dance with everyone that was there. And then we'd cook supper deal, and I can still see Ed Holmes cooking biscuits, and he had flour all over it. But we had some great times, and because we did things together was the main thing. And those people came from Grapeland and Crockett. They were some of our most faithful members. And then we had Sister Schmeichel. She lives up in there, over now above Hearn area, that came over. So we got a double-wide trailer. And then Brother James Olson, we were dependent on the Huntsville, I guess it was a ward then, I'm not even sure if it was a ward or right. And so they got organized here, and Brother Dean was called to be the first president, and they called me, and that's one calling I never even was interviewed for. They knew we were moving back, so they took a chance. And it got Ed Holmes, and he'd barely been baptized. So they had the organization now, the key of it. But the sad thing that happened is it wasn't just a few months after we were organized that Brother Dean got killed in a motorcycle accident out close to the mushroom plant. So then we reorganized, and again they took a chance and called me to be the branch president, and Ed Holmes was a counselor, and Glenn Stiffemeyer was a counselor. So we got far enough along in a little while that we said, well, let's buy some property. Now, do you think this is a prime piece of property we're sitting on right here?
Yes.
All these years it's sat here. You know how many acres you had to have to a church then to build a building? Had to have 3 acres.
3.2.
You know how much was here? 3 acres. See, the Lord's in the little things. So we bought the property, had a little groundbreaking. I remember a big old mesquite tree was sitting somewhere right out there, and that somebody hung his old straw hat on there while we was having it. So we got that taken care of, and then we kept growing. People move in, different families move in. The Roberts up at Marquette. I won't try to mention them all, but here and here. And so they said, let's just build a building. We got that property now. So we had approval to get a first phase. A first phase stops down there just past the bathroom. And don't have this part on it. And so one day, James Olson says, I'm going to branch president to come over and visit with me one Sunday afternoon. We had no idea what it was going to be about, but that day you had a building fund you had to raise, and it come through the state. They said, now this is your building fund. In those days, if we built this chapel, we had to pay 30% of local. The little local congregation, we had to pay 30% of it. If you live closer to headquarters, you paid 40% of it. So he got us over there. After the first little comments, then he said he threw a bombshell on them. He said, you know, while we're doing that, why don't we just build a 2-phase? Well, I've always said the counselors, they jumped on it like a old dog on a big old soup bowl. Oh, yeah, yeah. But I knew some things they didn't know. And I had to do some things they didn't have to do. I had to go ask, like Jerry Ashworth, to come in for tithing settlement, and I'd say, Jerry, you've been a faithful tithe payer. How about giving another 5 or 6% for a building fund? That's the way it worked. Youngs moved in during that period of time we were going through that. Lord sent them here. They didn't know why they came, but the Lord knew why He sent them. And so they finally talked me into it. It took a while. I said, how am I going to go tell those folks now? Already giving all that, asking them for all that money. And this was back in the spring of 1980. All right, it so happened that we had another high councilman assigned to it by the name of Brother Rudy Guajardo. And boy, you ever talk about somebody enthusiastic, Brother Rudy? Yeah, we can do it. We can get it done. You bet. Nothing to. Don't worry a bit. He wasn't having to do no worry. Rudy.
Wait just a minute. We're talking about Madisonville.
Yeah.
And President Alford said we need 5 buildings. So you talk about the 30%. And when we went to Salt Lake, they said, well, you know, I was concerned because 30% of 5 buildings is a lot of money.
Talk a little louder. They can't hear you about that.
But when we got this building approved, there was a 30% contribution from the local congregations. But the day that this building got approved, that night, the church saw wisdom to cut it to 15%. And still, I was looking at 5 buildings at 15%, and I knew basic economics of the state, and I said, that's going to be a lot of money from a lot of people. But it happened. It happened. And President Alford was all worried because he didn't think that Madisonville had gotten taken into the 5. I said, President, just sit down, so you're driving me nuts. I said, Madisonville is in, you know, and it was, and it is, and it's wonderful.
Thank you, Rudy. Thanks for all you did for us.
I didn't do anything as the Lord did. I mean, I just there to stick my nose.
So anyway, that was approved. That was when it was approved in April conference of '80, and so we come back and say, here we go. Well, now we got to do something as a branch president. We had to have 100 people average for sacrament meeting for 3 months in a row. And we was having maybe 70 in attendance, scattered all over the country now. So we sat down and we planned, and the Lord, I guess, led us and directed us, but we said, now if we're going to do this, we got to get off the vacation. So we're going to do it in September, October, November. And we went around and visited every family, all those, and we never shown up. We just had the name on the record. Had some interesting experiences. We had a family here named Gallahue. They were warm towards the church, but they didn't come. So went over to visit them one night. They had the 2 of them and a boy named Frankie. They had some friends there named the McFarlands. Not only did they commit to come, but the McFarlands, they committed the McFarlands to come, their friends. There was another 3. So there were 6 right there. And so things like that occurred. And so we told people no vacation, no sick leaves. You got to be here. And they responded. boy, we'd take account every Sunday and chalk it up as we were sort of like the Aggies when they playing ball, you know. Everything was go, go, go. So come that last Sunday, we were sitting about 99.9, and we didn't make 100 that last Sunday, but we were real close. So I guess the church thought we were close enough that they came. And so then got approval, the building was built. Had some interesting things happen then. We never had all the flat given to us, if I want to call that, the bitterness like Huntsville had. Huntsville had a terrible time. The minister wasn't going to let them build. They didn't want to have that property. Boy, they had a terrible time. But we never had any of that problem here, and what I attribute that to is all these missionaries and all those families that had lived here from a mid-19 and 5, 6, 8, 9, 20, 30, that they lived amongst them. Now, I don't know what they said behind their backs, but they never got out here demonstrating or anything like that while it was being built. One interesting thing happened, the building crew went off one day at lunch, and they were putting the rafters up. And instead of putting the board across to stabilize the rafters, they went off to lunch, and it came a little windstorm, and the rafters just fell in. So I think a lot of them probably said, well, the Lord don't want them there. You know? No one told us that. So they came back and started, and we got it finished, and then we found out several things, lessons. Some things I knew already, and some I didn't. I found out one thing. If everybody knew that they were needed, and you couldn't do without them in the church, there'd be very little inactivity in the church. Some of the people that came, like Brother Caleb Williams, that was when he lost his arm. Just as we started getting that 100 every Sunday, Brother Ed Holmes and I went up to Corsicana and ministered to him when it happened, right before the building. He came of course, you know, they had to take, you that know him know they had to take his arm off. And they came, he and his wife, faithfully, him not very good shape, to sacrament meetings. So we'd have people just coming through town that would show up and find out where we were on that street. I found out again, the Lord knows his business, and I found out that if you're needed, people will be there. Second thing, I still understand why, well, I do understand this. I've said a lot for years, one reason we got this building, because we had so many children. We had a lot of families that had a lot of children, and they had more faith than we had. When they asked the Lord, is it going to happen? They said, it's going to happen. Some of us, as Matthew Kelly, some of us old heads, it's a little harder for us to understand things like that. But we learned a lesson. The other thing was that I still haven't understood why he makes us worry and fret over things sometimes that he knows what it's going to turn out already. But he's going to see if we'll put forth the effort. The Lord's not going to do, he'll do his part, but he expects us to do our part. Just like all that I've told you that people did. So then we had time, and we planned, we had an open house, invited the community, came out, many of them in the community. When the temple was built, open house in the Dallas temple, we chartered 2 big buses and went as a group to the temple. There's pictures floating around somewhere of that. I saw there a big group. And when we got up to the temple, it was sort of like it was at Huntsville. They went to the open house in Dallas. You know what you run into right at the gate. You were getting a lot of anti-literature. And very bitter people were. But never saw any of that happen with us. And so, since then, we've had many families come and go that were needed when they came, and some of them needed to be here. We started getting people like the Youngs and the Thornleys, Rosses, and we have, today we're happy to have, so hoping President Olson could be here, but he's not very good health at all. But I talked to him on the phone the other night. He's still just has that old happy attitude and things like that about him. And she said she'd spent several weeks in the hospital, but said they put me back together again. I found out the doctors don't have much sympathy for old age. I've had a little episode a couple of weeks ago, and I went to see my primary doctor in the VA yesterday, and I said, "Why do you think that happened?" He said, "Did anybody ever tell you you're 91? So that was mine. So we're happy to have President Shumway here with us today. He was our counselor and our state presidency a while, and our state president, right, for several years. And he's glad he could be here with us. So.
Where is he?
Stand up, President. They don't know, most of them don't even know. He still hikes miles. You see why he stays in good shape and still a young man because of all of that. And he always said one thing about Madisonville branch, and I've heard him say it many, many times. He said that Madisonville branch was a branch that didn't know they were a branch. They just thought they were like a ward, and well, what is the difference? You know? And so that's the way it's been. The Lord sent us people, and He needed people, and He's going to continue to send us people when we need them. Not only, I didn't mention the first baptism here. We hadn't had missionaries for years. And they had sent in a couple of elders, had bicycles. They'd graduated from packing a grill, so they could ride a bicycle. And they tracked in Madisonville, and they met a lady at her daughter's house. Her name then was Delaware Green. She lived in North Sioux. The missionaries rode her bicycle over there and taught her the gospel. And she said, and she'd get in trouble in the church she went to anyway. She'd teach doctrine of the church that she didn't even know existed, but she read the scriptures. And so she said, "I knew there was something more out there." She said, "I knew it from reading the scriptures." So it didn't, her daughter and family, they wasn't interested at all. But many of you knew her and knew her faithfulness. She lived to be 100, and you talk about grit. When she was 99 years old, she thought there was one way you had to plant a tomato, Jerry. It was a post hole digger. You people know what a post hole digger is. You know, you got to dig a post. So here she's out there, 99 years old, digging a hole for her tomato, and the post hole fell on her foot and crippled her up for a while. So that's the kind of lady. And she was a great quilter. Always had something in her home, a quilt going on. And we got a picture somewhere of Nana and her sitting on the floor and they piecing a quilt, and Bobby Holmes just sitting over there looking. she had her way of doing it. Now that piece had to go there, it couldn't go here. So she was showing them how to do the quilt. And one more interesting thing about them, when they got older, so many people, Brother Ross served them as years as their home teacher, and Brother Williams served the whites. This is Sister Green again. She's remarried since she joined the church. She was with it. And they said, well, we don't think they're eating very good. They had 3 deep freezers full of food, put up a lot of stuff. So we're going to send you over there. They decided the way to do it is to you go eat with them. That's going to solve the situation. Well, I tried it one time. I went over there and he wouldn't let you eat because she was always, you want this? You got that? You want this? Have you just served this? She still didn't eat any more than they did, and they had the refrigerator full and 3 deep freezers full.
Aww.
What a wonderful things that happen to people's lives, and that's the kind of people He's blessed this branch with all these years. And it's been 46 years now. The first Sunday of June was our 46 years ago. We had our first meeting in this building. And yes, someday there's going to be a ward here. And someday there's going to be something up around the north of us where a lot of you live. When the Lord gets ready, He asks us to do our part to then. One other thing I want to tell about, I like to tell stories on people. I won't tell the one I've told on Jerry all these years. I want to tell one about Brother Mark Young. I think it's when he was branch president. We got an infestation of skunks. You come here in the morning and walk in that east door. I guess they should let it go there. They had a meeting there or something. Oh, it smelled terrible. So we got a skunk committee to get rid of the skunk. And they were getting in under the foundation over here. See, this thing is like on these, here sitting up on these beams, you know. In other words, you can walk under there and it's almost stand up right here. So we don't have to worry about an earthquake. And another thing they wanted when we built the building, how many snow plows we needed, snow blowers we needed. So Brother Young was, I think, in charge of this committee. They come up here one night and was skunk hunting, and they were successful. And then they talked about out there with taking the shovel and burying the skunk. I always said, I wonder what the neighbors thought. They talked about these people that get baptized for the dead and all that. What in the world they thought about us out here with
Yeah. That's not the true story. The true story was we tried to set it on fire. We got worried about the neighbors thinking maybe we were having kind of a special ceremony out there.
Or tell it like it is. Tell it straight. So anyway, brothers and sisters, I'm grateful for you. Grateful for all the people that might have not thought they were doing very much then. But if you touch one person's life, I just think about those missionaries back there in those early 1900s, 1520s, all they went through. And all of Houston, the big part of Houston, beginnings came from up here at Josie. There was nothing much happened in Houston until about 1919, 2021. And some of the families started moving down from Josie. One of them was there was a family out there, Deckers, and one of their daughters, real active, after they joined the church, the missionaries just lived at the Deckers for a while. first families that received them. That was her mother was the first one baptized. And so one of the Decker girls went to Houston to go to work. She married a fellow by the name of Wesley Palmer. And she was a good missionary. Wesley Palmer joined the church. Then another one on what we call Bullard Road or Ranch Lane, going out toward the cemetery. Puma Bullard, she was a niece of this Decker. She moved down there. Deanne's sister Decker was a good missionary. Her niece joined the church. She married a guy named Van. Brother Van was one of the early ones in the church. Moroni Stone, who was baptized after his dad and mother joined the church out here, then all the rest of the kids born had Book of Mormon name. Moroni Stone was the first bishop, maybe not the first one, but he was a bishop there in Melbourne Ward. And when the members did most of the building of the building, and when Huntsville was organized, they were dependent upon Melbourne. So you see how it all works together? So a lot of that early history of Houston started out at Josie Center,
Arnold,
Little Utah.
when we were teenagers, we go, of course, to the Melbourne Ward, and right next door to the house, I believe that the Stones lived there, or in-laws and things like that. And yeah, and so it was a lot of fun to just, well, where's the bishop, or where's the, so you better not mess up, because he's right there in that house.
Well, I'm going to wind it down. You've listened to me long enough. If you got any questions, I'd be glad to talk to you individually sometime, or if you want to come out to the house. We're pretty well, about the only other place you'll ever find us is visiting the doctor's office. And can't even go down to the pond fishing anymore. Now that's pretty tough. And but I'm grateful for the Lord has let me see these things happen, especially in the gospel, when we just had a handful. I'm going to tell you one other story. I'll get started here in a minute. I want to tell you one other about Josie. First it was Shannon Bright, then, Little Utah. Then it became, had a post office out there and a railhead, and then they named it Josie. We don't know why, but that's the way it is. So in my day, when I was about maybe still a teenager, about grown, it was about, we'd have 12 to 15 people out there. That was a good crowd. And three of them, one of them was my granddad, one of them was a non-member that lived down the road. His name was Roy Lindsay. That was, who am I trying to think of? His Wendell Covers. That was his wife's dad. And I had another little old dried up fella, Reuben Goodrich. He'd been baptized as a kid. His mom was, we called her Aunt Sally. She'd cut across the pasture, come into church every Sunday, have her bonnet on and her apron on. Well, they all liked to sing. And they were pretty good singers, but they're all hard of hearing. So one Sunday, we finally when we first went in there with an old organ there, the little pump organ, we had nobody to play it. So finally my sister learned to play, and she played, and then David Bird's sister came along next, she learned to play. And so I was leading the music that Sunday, and boy, when they was cutting down on it. And when we got to the end, there was three of them about that far apart when they ended. And I said, I will not say anything, I will not do any movement. But I looked over at my cousin Patsy, and she was laughing, and I couldn't stop. She really got me in trouble. My grandpa would come up after the meeting and said, what was wrong? And I don't know whether I didn't tell him the whole truth, I guarantee you. May the Lord bless us all. May He help us to make good memories in our own personal lives and with each other and in our families. I know the gospel's true. I know that the Lord we'll look back another 46 years and talk about what all happened in this length of time. May the Lord bless us. And I'll leave you my witness. Going to leave these for the library president. There's another one that's going to be the best one for Josie. It's strictly Josie. You just got one copy. You're going to get some more runoff, and we'll put in there. Okay? Oh yeah, one thing I about forgot. We had a song written for the dedication. Had two of the sisters. Had Sister Dean, she wrote the music, and Nana wrote the words. And when we sang it that Sunday, I guarantee you, there was people from the other side singing with us. So we're going to hear that today. Please, Diane. Now, if any of you have got a different version, you're welcome to give it.
about does it. Brother Adams, would you give us a closing prayer? And
Can I say something?
please, go ahead.
For those that don't know me, I'm Alan Taylor. I'm the second counselor in the stake presidency here. So I just wanted to tell you about something that happened in our last stake presidency meeting. President Goodman said, hey, guess what? The church has changed the requirements to make a ward. So, Brother Foster, you said we're going to become a ward pretty soon, and let me just tell you how close we are. Okay, so the guidelines from the church say you need 250 on your roll. Guess how many we have right now? I just looked it up. 245. Okay, and you need 20 priesthood holders, Melchizedek priesthood holders. How many do we have? We have 31. Okay, so we're good there. And you need participating adults, 100. Okay, we could probably scrounge that up. 100. So, you know, I think we're really this far from qualifying to become a ward. And, you know, this has been a wonderful event. It's just so great to hear from you, Brother Foster, and to see all you that have made this branch happen over the past 50 years. And say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this night to be able to attend this meeting and listen to President Foster and the others that were talking about how this branch was to be able to grow in this area. Heavenly Father, we ask that we not stop here. We listen to how they were able to make things happen. Help us to pull together and help us to become a ward. Help us to reach out to those around us, our friends. Help us find the ones that are not active anymore. Reach out and help us, Heavenly Father, to do the things we need to pull this into a war. And we say these things in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Arnold, there were two families that I remember as a child that weren't mentioned tonight. That your mother and father, Tom and Lena Foster, were bedrock Latter-day Saints in the early days when I was a teenage boy here, when we first moved here. And the other one was Lilibel and Mutt Burr. I think those guys, those two families were huge cornerstones for the strength of this Madisonville branch when I was a boy starting the branch here.
Let me mention one other thing. When Huntsville was organized, there was nothing in Conroe. Can you believe it? When Huntsville branch was organized in the early 50s, there was no organization at all with Conroe. We had Brother Stotts came up. He had been in he was in the German army in the First World War, and he'd been a prisoner of the U.S. And he'd drive up and pick up and
I was his home teacher.
or,
I was Brother Stites' home teacher in 1980 when I moved there. But he would say in his German, says, "I know this church is true." The way he was really.
well, okay, but thanks
Amen.
again.
Amen.
Amen.